Leander Horsford is at his home on the Sunday morning of November 4th, 2018, when he hears a knock at the door. His son is the first one to get to the door, and he answers it. When Lee gets to the door, he's greeted by the Forsyth County Police. They are less than cordial, and they immediately ask Leander to confirm who he is. Confused by this visit, Lee asks, "What's this all about?" And after 3 times of asking, he's finally told, "It's about your wife. She's deceased." Leander would say that the way he was told was very cold. No sense of empathy or even understanding. When he asked how she passed, he was met with another confusing statement. She tripped and fell over some garden edging. It was an accident. His wife, Tamla Horsford, had been out at an all-girls slumber party to celebrate her friend Jean's birthday the night before. Leander had spoken with Tamla on FaceTime while she was there, and all appeared to be normal. Tamla was having a great time. She didn't seem to be intoxicated, especially to the point of anything happening. Being from the islands, Lee would say that Tamla could hold her liquor very well. So tripping and falling was not something that made any sense to Lee, especially being told that she died from it. When he asked if he could go see his wife, he was told, no, everything's been taken care of already. And so 41-year-old mother of 6, grandma-to-be, was gone, just like that. Nothing to see here. But was it really that simple? Was Tamla's death really just a tragic accident? Just your run-of-the-mill accidental death due to over-intoxication? Forsyth PD sure thought so. But Leander had questions and concerns. Lots of them. And in this video, we're going to cover all of it, starting from the beginning. Start out by saying that there are so many inconsistencies with this case. My head's spinning. It's why it's taken me so long to get this video out. It was really hard for me to put a script together because of all these inconsistencies. It was like the more I dug into the case, the more inconsistencies I found. And it was like, do I write the script and talk about every inconsistency as I'm saying things, or do I just tell the story and then we go over the inconsistencies? So this was supposed to be a 1-part video. It was going to be probably about a 45-minute long video, but there's just so much, and I don't like to half-ass anything. So I wanted you guys to hear everything. So it is going to be in 2 parts, just right off the bat. I'm going to just tell the story the way it was told to police so that you can get an idea of what allegedly happened. But in part 2, we're going to break it all down. One of the biggest issues in this case causing inconsistencies is the fact that the Saturday to Sunday when this happened, it was daylight savings time. This is when the clocks fall back an hour. And this happens at 2 a.m. So if someone said something happened at 7:30 in the morning and they were looking at their clock, like say on the wall or an alarm clock or a microwave or an oven, whatever, it would say 8:30 still, unless they had changed it the night before, which no one ever made mention of changing the clocks back the night before. But obviously if they were looking at their cell phone, your cell phone automatically changes the time, so they would say 7:30. I told you your head might spin. So just know that they think they have it all figured out. When I say 8:30, it's supposedly 8:30 with the time change. So, all right, you guys. Tamla Horsford, or Tam, as everyone would call her, was born in 1978 on the Caribbean island of St. Vincent. When she was about 11 years old, her family moved to the U.S., settling in the Bronx. She eventually moved to Florida, and this is where she met and married her husband, Leander, or Lee. Due to a job opportunity for Leander, the family relocated to Cumming, Georgia, and it was there that the story unfolds. Leander had a daughter from a prior relationship, and Tamla fell just as much in love with her as she had with Lee. She raised her as her own, and eventually Leander and Tamla went on to have 5 more children together, all boys. Tamla was in heaven. Motherhood suited her very well. She was an amazing stay-at-home mom to the kids. She was at every game and every extracurricular activity, and she dedicated her every waking moment to her children. Leander would talk about Tamla being on the sideline with a bullhorn, repeating her favorite mantra, "You can't stop greatness." Tamla's son was on the football team, and this is where she would meet Jean. Jean's son was on the team as well, and on Saturdays, the two would be on the sidelines together cheering their sons on. They developed a friendship quickly, as Tamla was extremely outgoing and friendly. Everyone who knew her would say this. She was always in a great mood and she was always kind to everyone. Before we go any farther, I feel it's really important to mention the history of Cumming, Georgia. If you watched my series on Kendrick Johnson, this is going to sound very familiar to you. Racism is still quite prevalent in the South, and Cumming, Georgia is one of those towns. In fact, all of Forsyth County has a history dating back to 1912, where it was said that they were successful in racial cleansing. Yes, you heard me right. The county had gone from 198 blacks down to just 5, and they thought this was just the most wonderful thing in the world. And throughout the years, the people of Forsyth fought to keep their county whites only. Right now, you may be thinking, well, that's the past, it's not like that anymore, and that race has nothing to do with this case. Yes, it was the past, and certain areas of the US aren't really like that anymore, but I think in this case, race has a lot to do with how it was handled. Because as I researched this case, I've noticed that Tamla's race did seem to play a big part in how this case was treated. And you would say that that's my opinion, but I think it's pretty obvious. And as we get more into things, I think you'll see where I'm coming from. So it's now October 2018, and Tamla is over the moon. Her eldest child, her daughter, has just told her that she's pregnant, and Tamla is super excited to become a grandmother. She has also just received an invite to her new good friend Jean's birthday party. This is going to be an all-girls sleepover, and Jean would say that she chose a sleepover / pajama party because they were going to be watching the LSU football game and they were going to be drinking, and this way no one would have to worry about driving home intoxicated or paying for an Uber. So they just pre-planned this was going to be like a slumber party, an all-girls slumber party. Also, it was Jean's kids' weekend with their father, so all 4 of her kids were at their dad's, and she had plenty of room for everyone to have a bed to sleep in. Now, I took a look at this house, and it's a 6-bedroom home, so she certainly did not lie when she said she had room for everyone. Tamla had met Jean that August and hadn't really hung out with her much outside of those Saturday football games, but she'd attended a pumpkin carving party at Jean's home the weekend prior to the slumber party. And so she'd met a couple of the other women who were invited to the slumber party. And Leander said that Tamla wasn't super excited to go at first. She said she really didn't feel that comfortable going, but at the same time, she didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings by saying no. The party would have 10 women total in attendance. Jean, whose home it was, Stacy Smith, who would coordinate the party, and 8 other women. In addition to Tamla was Madeline, Nicole, Marcy, Bridget, Jennifer, Sarah, and Paula. Tamla being the only black woman invited. While this party was said to be women only, there were 2 men that ended up being in attendance. Jose Barrera, who was Jean's boyfriend, and Tom Smith, who is Stacy's husband. It wasn't planned, but allegedly Jose hadn't been feeling well. He was having some stomach issues, but he said that he would just be in the basement watching the football game in their theater room. Tom Smith ended up being there because Stacy's sister Jamie had a gender reveal party at their home earlier in the day, and she had some college friends visiting from out of town that were staying overnight. So Tom just wanted to be out of the way, so he was going to be in the theater room in the basement with Jose over at Jean's house instead, watching the game. On the day of the party, Jean was out running errands all day. Nicole and Madeline were setting up for the party, which was scheduled to begin at about 7 p.m. When Jean got home, she went straight upstairs and got ready, and by the time she came down, pretty much everyone was there. This was at about 7:30. Tamla had texted Jean and Stacy to let them know that she was going to be running a little bit late, and she ended up arriving between 8 and 8:30 p.m. Some of the women were dropped off by their husbands, and some drove themselves, like Tamla. Leander had said that he actually had plans for that evening, but he decided to stay home with the boys and allowed Tamla to have her girls' night out with her new friends. She was such a loyal and doting mother, always taking care of her family first, and he felt that she deserved to have this break. So even though Leander was a little bit upset about having to cancel his plans and Tamla wasn't super crazy about going, they both decided that she deserved this night out. Tamla arrived to the party in a great mood. From all accounts, she was outgoing, she was fun, and she immediately went to put her PJs on. There were a few women that she didn't know. She went and introduced herself to them right away, and that was Sarah, Marcy, and Nicole. As a gift for Jean, Tamla had brought out a very expensive bottle of tequila imported from Mexico. And while Tamla thought this would be a great gift for a night of drinking, especially, Jean hated tequila, and she made it very clear that she would not be drinking any of it. There was a point where everyone took a shot during the night, but it was said that what they took was Fireball with the exception of Tamla. And while Tamla was outside smoking a cigarette, they had actually passed the bottle of tequila around to smell it, and they all snubbed their noses at it and refused to drink it. And honestly, to listen to some of these women talk in their interviews with police, I would like to smack a few. They're so stuck up and rude, and in my opinion, two-faced. And believe me, we're gonna talk about it later. Tamla was the only one who ended up drinking the tequila that night, according to everyone there. She had several tequila waters throughout the evening. There were only 2 women that attended the party that did not drink alcohol, or at least that's what they said, and that was Sarah and Nicole. They were not planning on staying the night, and they knew that they were going to be driving home. So everyone was having a great time, and it was said that no one got extremely out of hand, extremely drunk, with the exception of one woman, and that would be Jennifer, or Jen. It didn't really surprise anyone in attendance because she was known to be a drinker, and she was known to consume a bit too much, too fast. She had even gotten a DUI in the past. Tamla was also a smoker. She went outside several times throughout the night to smoke a cigarette on the back balcony. But every time she went out for a cigarette, it was said that someone went out with her each time. At one point during the night, while outside smoking a cigarette, it was said that Tamla offered up some weed, and that Madeline and Stacy also smoked with her, though it took some time to get that out of those two. And when they did admit to it, they said that they only smoked a little bit because Jean had caught them and was very upset. She didn't want Jose to find out that there was weed at the party because he was actually a pretrial probation officer, and John said that he could lose his job. There was a point during the night where the women ran out of ice, so they sent Jose and Tom out to the store to get another bag. When the men returned, they allegedly went back downstairs, but it was also said that they came back upstairs at halftime. At about 10 p.m., Paula finally arrives, and they sing happy birthday, they have cake, and then Sarah and Nicole said that they left at about 10:30. Tamla FaceTimes Leander to say goodnight, and she also says goodnight to each one of her 5 boys. She has the women at the party say hi to them, and at about 12:30, she calls her daughter to say goodnight to her as well and tells all the women she's expecting a grandbaby, and she's so excited. The remaining women decide to play Cards Against Humanity, but everyone was pretty drunk by this point, and so it didn't last too long. After the game was over, most of the women decided that it was time for bed. Marcy took Jen to bed, who was extremely just out of pocket drunk at this point, and she said that they watched Shrek and passed out shortly after laying down. Between 1 a.m. and 1:15 a.m., the rest of them decided to head to bed. It was at that point where Tamla mentioned wanting to go home, but of course nobody was okay with this because she'd been drinking tequila all night long. Leander would later say that being from the islands, Tamla could hold her liquor and she would have made it home no problem. Nevertheless, Tamla listened to her friends and decided to stay. She was a bit upset that she did not have a sleeping buddy, as everyone else had paired up for the night. Stacy set her phone in the kitchen on the counter next to Tam's, and she said that their phones could be sleeping buddies for the night. Whatever the deal with that was, I don't know. Stacy would later say they laughed, they hugged. Stacy and Tom, her husband, went up to bed, and Tam said she was going to smoke another cigarette and then she'd be up to bed. This left Tam and Bridget as the only ones up. And Bridget was supposed to stay the night, so they probably would have been sleeping buddies, but Bridget decided to go home. So according to Bridget, she and Tam hung out in the kitchen, Tam was eating gumbo, and Jose corroborated this story. He said that he had forgotten his charger down in the theater room, and so he ran down to get it. Passing by the kitchen, he saw Tam eating gumbo at the island, which he only saw her. But he said that there was a wall there, so there could have been somebody there on the other side of that wall. Bridget was still awake because she was actually waiting for her husband Gary to come pick her up. Bridget had really bad anxiety, and she said that she always felt like she had to sleep with one eye open if she was sleeping at someone else's house. So while Tam was eating gumbo, Bridget was cleaning up. Gary arrived to pick up Bridget, and Bridget said that Tam walked her to the door, gave her a hug and a kiss on the cheek. They said goodbye, and Bridget left. John's house was equipped with an Xfinity alarm system, and this alarm system logged every time a main door to the home was opened or closed. It also would send alerts to Jean's phone, letting her know which door was active with the timestamp of when the door opened and when it closed. There was an alert of the back door opening at 1:49 a.m. and then shutting at 1:50 a.m. And this would make sense with Tamla saying she's gonna go outside and smoke one more cigarette before bed. There's another alert at 1:57 a.m. of the back door opening again, which would indicate she was coming back in from that cigarette. So she was outside for about 7 minutes, and the door opens for her to come back in, but the door never closes. There's no alert of that door ever closing after it's opened at 1:57 a.m. Another alert comes at 4:10 a.m. from the front door, opening and closing, and that is allegedly Marcy, who said she needed to leave early because she had a new job at Coach that she was starting the next morning, and that she needed to get home and shower and be all fresh to go for her first day at work at 6 a.m. But what's interesting about this is that when investigated, it was said that Marcy's shift actually started at 10 a.m. So 6 hours to get ready seems a little excessive. Paula is the next one to leave, and she said that she left at 7:30 a.m. Stacy and Tom pack up their crock pot and they leave between 8 and 8:30 a.m. Stacy said that she remembered seeing Tamla's phone still next to hers on the counter of the kitchen, and she remembers thinking to herself, good, she stayed, she didn't drive. At about 8:30 a.m., Madeline, Jean's aunt, walks by the window on her way to make coffee, and this is when she sees Tam on the ground outside, not moving. Can anyone guess what the first thing Madeline does when she sees this? Take a wild guess. Run out to give Tam assistance? Call 911? Scream for help? No. Madeline drops to her knees and she begins to pray. Yes, she really did that. In Madeline's own words, during her interview with police, she says she was on her way to make her morning coffee when she saw Tamla. Though she didn't remember her name, she said, quote, "I didn't start the coffee. I got on my knees and I said a prayer," unquote. She then said she ran upstairs to get Jose, but that she heard water running and she thought that maybe Jose and Jean were taking a shower. So she lightly tapped on the door, and when she got no response, she says that she ran back downstairs to take another look at Tam. She said she was hoping maybe she had moved and that she was just passed out. But when she saw Tam, she was still in the same position. So she runs back upstairs again, and this time she knocks on the door. And Jean says, "Come in." And Jean and Jose are now sitting up in bed, wondering what the hell is going on. Madeline insists that she needs to talk to Jose and only Jose. So I don't know what's up with that. And I also don't know what's up with the running water because they were both sleeping. Her knocking was what woke them up. And so Madeline proceeds to tell Jean her friend from the islands was outside on the ground, not moving. Jose gets up to go see for himself, and at 8:59 a.m., a 911 call is placed by Jean. She reports that Tamla was drinking on the balcony and seemed to have fallen off the balcony. Very quickly, Jose gets on the phone and takes over. And let me tell you, there is no emotion in Jean's voice during this call, nor Jose's. They explain to the 911 dispatcher that the balcony is about a 20-foot drop. And Jose also says that Tamla's not breathing and nobody has attempted CPR. The dispatcher sends out the police and ambulance at 9 a.m. and the police arrive on scene at 9:07. However, the ambulance was called off by police, even though no one had done CPR or even attempted to see if she was still savable. This is where we have our first inconsistency, and that would be the position of Tamla's body, because every person who saw her body said the exact same thing, which is that Tamla was lying face down, like literally face in the grass down, with her arms to the side, palms up. So they were like down to the side, palms facing upward, and her face just flat in the grass. So it was a very unnatural position, and that's what supposedly everyone says that's why it's like burned in their brain, because it was just so unnatural looking. Jose, Jean, Madeline, and Jen all saw her, and they all said that this was the position she was in. Almost like she didn't even brace for this fall. It was like a face plant. But in police photos of the scene, this is not the position that Tamla was in. As you can see, Tamla's right arm was down to the side with her palm somewhat up, but her left arm was up and bent, and the fist was loosely closed. Her head was turned to the right side, and in these photos, it would appear that she had braced herself for a fall. There are two things that go through my mind here based on what we know so far. Either Jose moved her before police got there, or police moved her. Tamla did appear to have a few minor injuries, like some cuts to her wrists, legs, and the side of her face. At least that's what was originally reported. So police go to tell Leander that his wife is dead. And as I said at the beginning, he is not buying it. He said that this is a woman who can drink a half a bottle of tequila and do the salsa in 6-inch heels. Yet the police are telling him that she tripped and fell and died in a ground level fall, nonetheless. They also refused to let him go see his wife's body, which really didn't help his disbelief. He did end up going. And the fact that police told Leander that this was an accident before an autopsy was even performed is beyond me. That should have never happened. They had no idea how she passed away, so the fact that they straight up called it an accident from the beginning is wrong and sus AF, in my opinion. So an autopsy is completed and it comes back, and in it there are notes of small cuts and abrasions all over her face, arms, legs, everywhere. And it showed a laceration to the right ventricle to her heart. Severe injuries to her head, neck, and torso was what was initially reported, as well as a wrist dislocation, a subarachnoid hemorrhage, as well as a subdural hemorrhage, and a fracture of the second cervical vertebrae. So the C-spine, so she broke her neck. Now, get out your notebook and write that all down and keep it all in mind, because we're going to talk about it later. There was also a toxicology report done, and that report noted THC in trace amounts, which makes sense with her sharing a couple hits with Madeline and Stacy. It also showed her alcohol level at being at 0.238. Now that's pretty high. We talk about alcohol levels in one of my Kylie Rodney videos. A 0.23 is high. Yet again, we have to take into account that this is someone who can hold their alcohol, for one. For two, I don't trust the autopsy or the officers, so it's very well that that wasn't even the right number. But even if it were, it's not just her husband who says that this woman could hold her alcohol. All of the women in attendance told police this during their interviews, and so did Lee. And Tamla, from all accounts, did not seem drunk, just happy. She was not slurring her words. She was not stumbling. She just appeared to be very happy and outgoing. I mean, she was standing up eating gumbo, completely done drinking for the night, when Bridget left and Jose last saw her. Another thing that was interesting that was found in her system, however, was alprazolam. And to those of you who don't know what that is, that's Xanax. Tamla did not take Xanax. She did not have issues with anxiety from all accounts, and she did not have a prescription for it. So why it was in her system was very interesting. Even more suspicious is that it hadn't been metabolized yet, indicating that it was taken very, very shortly before she passed away. The cause of death for Tamla Horsford was ruled to be multiple blunt force injuries consistent with a fall. The manner of death was accident. On February 6th of 2019, the autopsy results were made public. No foul play was indicated. But here's another issue. There were no photos of the autopsy taken, which is required by law as far as I'm concerned, but either way, it's unheard of. There were also hardly any scene photos. The first narrative the police went with was actually a ground level fall, where she tripped over some metal edging on the property. And Madeline had said in her interview that she had tripped over it a lot too, and that's what she thought at first, was that Tamla tripped over that same edging that she would trip over. Well, the difference between Madeline and Tamla is that Madeline lived to tell about it. And supposedly this happened to her several times, but yet she's still here, so I don't know. Their second narrative was that she fell from the balcony, but in my opinion, neither of these narratives fit. They don't fit the injuries, because a ground level fall would not have caused the injuries that were mentioned in the autopsy, and a 20-foot fall from a balcony face first with no arms out to brace you or fall doesn't fit the injuries either, because I feel like there would be a lot of facial injuries with that. A broken nose, black eyes, you know, teeth maybe even knocked out. Like, she had no facial injuries, none, with the exception of a couple scratches. According to the first people to see her lying there, they said she was face to the ground. I mean, like I said, where are the injuries saying that. Leander spoke about how unsympathetic that police were when they told him of his wife's passing. But something that really got him angry, and justifiably so, was the way the funeral home made her up for the wake. Let me mention first and foremost who paid for the funeral. Jean's mother, okay? Leander said he went into the funeral home first, leaving his boys outside. He wanted to see Tamla first before he had his boys come in, and he was very grateful that he did, because when he saw Tamla, he said she was made up with what appeared to be black shoe polish. That's how dark they made her. Right away, he said, what the fuck? That's not, fix that. And he was told that the makeup had to be darker because of all the bruising. But Tamla is light-skinned black. And in Leander's own words, he said this looked like she was painted with black shoe polish, like blackface. His immediate thought was, this needs to be a closed casket. I mean, I can't have the viewing like that.
When I went into the funeral home, I probably scared the shit out of everybody because I yelled, "What the fuck?" as loud as I could. I walked in and I saw my wife look like she had shoe polish on her face, black shoe polish all over her face. And I flipped out and I was like, nope, nope, nope. And I walked out and I told them, take that off of my wife. Take all that. Well, sir, I'm sorry, but we had to cover up the bruising and this and that. And I don't cover up the bruising. You don't cover up the bruising with black shoe polish. My wife is my color. You know, but yet her skin was this color, like blackface. And so I was really pissed, and I was gonna close the casket and just leave it a closed casket. So my sons came out to me and said, "Dad, what's wrong, man? Dad, what's wrong? Dad, what's wrong?" And I said, "You can't go in there. You can't see that. That's not your mom. That's not the way your mom looks." And they're like, "Dad, I don't care. I want to see. I said, "No." I said, "These are grown man decisions. I don't want to see." I'm like, "You're making a grown man decision. You're going to have to deal with it." And he's like, "I don't give a fuck, Dad. I want to see." And that was my oldest at the time because he was pissed. And so I said, "You know what? Okay, you want to make grown man decisions? Come on, let's go." So I went in with my oldest boy, and he stood next to me, and we both just stood there and looked at her, and neither one of us shed a tear because he looked nothing like her.
So he was irate. I'm not sure what happened with that, if they fixed that issue or what happened, but the disrespect in that, if you can't see that. So he goes outside and he tells his sons, "You can't go in there. You can't see her like that. She doesn't look anything like herself." Their oldest son said, "I don't care what she looks like. I'm going to see her. I want to see my mother." And so Leander said, "You know what? You're a big boy. You want to make big boy decisions? Come on in with me. Let's go see her," leaving the little one still outside. And he said that he stood next to his son and they both looked down at Tamla and they had no emotion in them whatsoever, other than anger, because she didn't look anything like Tamla. So I mentioned the Xfinity security system and the doors. Jean also had security cameras set up around her home. And take a wild guess what the deal was with those cameras. You guessed it, they weren't recording. In fact, the battery for the entire surveillance system was dead, and none of the cameras were working, according to Jean. Her explanation for this was that she originally got those security cameras for each main door of her home, and that was because she had a bitter divorce and her ex-husband had been going into the home when she wasn't there. So she got the cameras, but over the years things had cooled down, they were getting along, and when the battery went out, she couldn't find the charger for it and never replaced the charger. However, in the 911 call, Jose said that there were cameras and that they would be able to tell what happened. Jean was adamant that Jose knew that these cameras didn't work. In fact, he had helped her tear the house apart, trying to find the charger. I also listened to some interviews with neighbors, and one of these neighbors said that Jean went over to his house after the incident to kind of explain what was going on, and she told him that the video showed that Tamla fell from the balcony. What video? I thought the cameras weren't working. Jean, of course, denies this. She said, "I wish we had video." because then we would know. In one of Jose's interviews, he says that there was a loose cigarette and a lighter on the ground of the balcony when he came out the very first time before he saw Tamla, and that he picked it up and set both on the fireplace. He said he did this because he has OCD, and that's just his nature. If he sees something out of place, he picks it up and puts it where it should go. He said this is obviously before he saw Tamla, because he wouldn't have stopped to pick up the cigarette and lighter had he known what he was going to be walking into. And that if he had, he wouldn't have bothered with it. But that's a lie, because he already said, and Madeline confirms and Jean confirms, that Madeline already told him that Tamla was lying face down in the grass, not moving. So he knew where she was, and he knew what he was about to see. Yet he still stops to pick up a cigarette and a lighter and place it on the fire pit because he's OCD and it's out of place. Did he need to put his prints on them for some reason, is what I'm wondering? And it really wouldn't matter because the police didn't take that as evidence at all. In fact, none of the cigarette butts that were, you know what, we'll get into that later. I guess what I'm trying to say is the police did not handle this case lawfully, period. Anytime this happens, it creates suspicion and doubt about everything. Things that could be absolutely normal human nature all of a sudden begin to look very suspicious. Even in the questioning of witnesses, the police were extremely informal. The first thing that they did was allow all that were there to sit in a room together and wait to be questioned. The remaining, who were called back to the party, the ones that had left, were all together outside. So they're all able to talk among themselves, which is not the way it typically goes. The formal questioning didn't begin until the 9th of November and went until the 20th of November, and it was not done at the station. They had Jean call everyone that had left to come back to her home to be questioned. None of these interviews were done at a police station, as is protocol, especially in a suspicious death. I mean, you have a 40-year-old mother who's fit, active, with no health concerns, dead from tripping and falling. This is suspicious, right? They should have immediately separated and formally questioned all that were there that night at the police station. And with the formal recorded interviews beginning 5 days later, they had plenty of time to get their story straight. Though even with this time to get their story straight, they still had so many inconsistencies. It wasn't until the GBI reopened the case 2 years later that any of the phones were actually taken and gone through thoroughly either. No data recovery was done. No search for any deleted messages, nothing until 2 years later. And by that time, some of them had brand new phones, and the ones that still had the same phone didn't really have anything left on it from that time. Nothing relevant to the case, anyway. Paula had one video saved, and she was able to arrange a time that worked best for her to drop the phone off to be looked at. But she became very concerned and sounded almost like she was about to cry when she was told that even deleted messages would be recovered. Now, before I end this video, I want to leave you with a few things. For one, Bridget's interview, because she was the last one to see Tamla alive that we know of. Not only that, Bridget's interview was a hot flippin' mess, in my opinion. She frequently went completely off topic, talking about children and being a nanny, not just to her own children, but to other people's children. Hello, that's what a nanny is. It's other people's children. You're not a nanny to your own kids, like you're their mother. But anyway, talking about how she watched over people and situations, and that even when drinking, she always keeps her faculties about her. She mentions how she doesn't really have anyone she trusts, besides children, of course. That the friends that she does have, she's very protective over, like Jean and her boss. Another thing that came out in her interview, after others had already told police first, of course, was her prescription to Xanax. You see, Bridget had severe anxiety. Remember, that's why she didn't end up staying at Jean's overnight, as she had planned to, allegedly. She was prescribed Xanax of all sorts, and she carried some around her neck in a necklace. She was wearing her X necklace the night of the party too. But she is adamant that she would never give her medication to anyone because she needs it. So no, the Xanax that was in Tamla's system was not from her. She said that she didn't know anything about that. And Tam didn't appear to even have taken anything like Xanax. She was far too bubbly and outgoing and happy, and not at all how you would be if you had taken Xanax on top of alcohol especially. What Bridget didn't know was that Stacy had text messages on her phone between her and Bridget meeting up for Xanax. Stacy tried to deny it as well, but the texts were right there. Bridget finally admitted to this, saying that yes, on certain occasions she had given Xanax out to Stacy and John, but that she would never give it to a stranger. And Tamla was a stranger to her. And she didn't much like Tamla either, though her dislike for Tamla wasn't mentioned until right then. In fact, many interviews from the other women seemed to paint Tamla in a bad light, like she wasn't up to their standards. The tequila, the weed, the over-the-top friendliness, fun, outgoing nature, the way they talked about her in their police interviews were almost like they were trash-talking her. I think they were jealous of her, but that's just my opinion. But the last thing I want to leave you with that ties into the beginning of this interview in regards to race being a factor is that Tyler Sexton and Mike Christian were two of the lead investigators on this case. They were noted for making racial slurs, not just in general, but in regards to Tamla. Mike Christian even resigned when an investigation was opened up on him. It was also said that some of the women even bribed them a little bit. Madeline had made them cookies when they came to question her, and John and Stacy bought both Mike and Tyler gift cards to Dunkin' Donuts. I feel like I jumped around a lot. Did I? I don't know. I feel like I did. And I really want to feel like I presented this case well enough that you understand that it is quite likely that this case was in fact a homicide or an accident that may have been covered up. And that the reason that it was treated as an accident from jump is mainly because Tamla was Black. Because many people have pointed out, and I agree, that if this were 9 Black women having a party and the only white woman there ended up dead, it would have been treated as a crime scene first and foremost, not the other way around, which is the situation here. My belief in general is that corrupt cops are everywhere. Race doesn't always have anything to do with it. I believe that many times prior history with police is what makes certain people a target, no matter what race they are. But in certain cases, like this one, where the person has no prior history, she's a contributing member to society, she's no different than any of the other women at this party, with the exception of her skin color and the fact that she's a decent human being. I have no other choice but to call it how I see it. I told you earlier to mark down what the autopsy findings were. And the reason that I said that, and it's fine if you didn't do it, it's kind of a joke, but it's because we have a second autopsy to compare it to. The family had an independent autopsy done, and they've shared it with the public. And I'm gonna be sharing it with you, and we're going to compare the 2 autopsies. But we're going to do that in part 2. I put a message on my community page the other day. I really went down a rabbit hole with this, and I'm actually still in the process of digging, because the more I look into this, like I said at the beginning, the more inconsistencies I find. And also, like I said, I don't half-ass anything, and I for sure don't want to half-ass this case, because I think it needs to be reopened again, and I think a 3rd autopsy needs to be done, but that's just my opinion. So we're gonna end part 1 right now, and we will get into the autopsies and more into the interviews in part 2. It's not going to be long to wait until part 2 because I already have most of the script typed out already. So what do you think so far? Let me know in the comments, and I will talk to you guys very, very soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and again, we need to fight for justice for some of these people, and Tamla is certainly someone that I believe we need to fight more for.